This is All Out Politics, news, debate and opinion from the heart of Westminster. And time for our daily debate. Yesterday, the Chancellor said he wanted a transition deal for Britain as it edges out of the EU. Well, has he got that one right? And indeed, how's the economy going for today's Brexit rematch for the 52%? We have Roger Bootle from The Economist for Brexit and for the defeated 48% Remainers, and Pettifer of Prime Economics. Welcome to you both. Well, let's just deal with this technical question first of all. Do we need a transition phase beyond the 2 years laid down following the execution of Article 50?
Well, I don't think so. I think it would be a good idea to, frankly, get on with it. It's all very well saying you've got time to adjust, that makes things better. That's true, but also it actually increases the uncertainty. I think, you know, if you once you've got a deal that there was some sort of shading over time, that might help a bit. But the last thing we need, frankly, is for our business people to be sitting here thinking we're not going to know for the next 4 years.
Quite, and I agree with that. I mean, I've thought for a long time there's no such thing as a in-between Brexit. There's either hard or no Brexit.
I mean, Philip Hammond's point to the Treasury Select Committee was basically you can't do it in the time. It's too technical, particularly in the financial and the city.
Well, that's depending on what the Europeans agree to. So I don't know how he can say that without knowing what the deal is going to be. I agree, there's got to be a deal. Are the Europeans going to be happy for us to have a free trade deal with them, but no movement of labour? If they are, then that's fine, and that could take some time. But if they're not going to be happy with that, then I'm afraid it's you know, there's no in between.
But I mean, if you say got to a point of heads of agreement, but said, look, when it comes to banking regulation, we need to talk some more. So beyond this 2 years, we're going to have a 2-year period where we're going to keep things in force. Would that still be a problem for you?
I think there might be something to be said for that, but you've got to recognise that a lot of us on my side are suspicious about what the game is here. There is a possibility, isn't there, that the Ramonas are going to carry on this way, delaying and delaying and delaying. Now, you've got to be careful about what the nature of trade deals is. I think if we can get a reasonable deal from the EU, that's well worth going for and entering into negotiations about. But if we reach the conclusion that we're not going to get anywhere, there is an alternative, which is simply to write a letter and say, terribly sorry, old chaps, but we're off. We'd like to do free trade with you. Please, you know, admit our stuff without any barriers and tariffs. As far as we're concerned, we're declaring unilateral free trade.
So that is the world trade option?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Would that work?
Well, I mean, my scepticism is whether the Europeans will agree to that, because we have so angered them. And
but surely they can't not agree to that. I mean, that is hard Brexit, isn't it? We say no customs union, no single market. We're going back to world.
I'm sorry. Yes, yeah. In that case, they can't disagree with that, and then that's
and
the way
where does that leave us?
That leaves us, I think, in a very tricky spot. And I would hate to be someone big in the city wondering what to do with my business in the meantime.
Why? What would we lose?
Well, because the City of London is really quite important to our economy, much as I am critical of many of its activities. And the question is, where are they going to move to, and will they be able to do that in time?
Or why would they move at all? Would they move?
I don't think that we would be in a tricky spot at all. Actually, it would resolve a lot of the uncertainty. We get this great gain because we wouldn't have to impose the European Common External Tariff on rest of the world's exports into us. I wouldn't go for that as a first best option, because I think there is a chance that we could still do a deal with the Europeans. They might just play ball, and if they do, then we ought to go for that, frankly. But if I think they're not going to play ball, I would definitely press the button on unilateral free trade.
The real problem here is that we're playing the nationalist card. We're saying, you know, we know best. We know what's good for us. We care about us.
In a sense, that's what the 52% did in their vote, isn't it?
Yes, and it's what Britain has always done in relation to Europe. It's always been about what can we get out of Europe, what's good for us from Europe, what can we milk from the system, not what can we give towards international stability and solidarity. We haven't ever thought like that, and we're still not thinking. We're still thinking about we're going to look after number one, regardless of what the Europeans say.
What's wrong with that? Do you think the French aren't doing that?
No, I don't think. I think the Europeans have got a broader mission. I mean, the Europeans have been through 2 world wars, and they want. Well, we were probably not as harmed as they were, they're traumatized by it still. And they want stability, they want a certain amount of order and peace. And we don't share those ambitions. We just want to look after number one. And there's something horribly nationalistic about our approach. And I think it's dangerous in political terms, Adam. We are reinvigorating the nationalist right with this sort of talk. And it's bad for us. It's bad for business too.
Well, I think this is complete nonsense. There's nothing wrong with trying to look after your own economic affairs. Frankly, that's perfectly acceptable, and it's the way that most countries in the world behave. Now, over and above that, of course, we want peace and stability. The question is, what has the EU brought to the table in this regard? Is this a perfectly functioning organisation? I was in Italy recently, speaking at a conference. I've never experienced anti-German feeling like it, quite frankly. Yeah. The euro, which is the EU's biggest project so far from uniting Europe, actually, it set one country against another.
No, I completely agree with Roger about that. He's absolutely right. And the Germans have got themselves into this awful position. But the point is that in a union of states, we would be working together. We would be using our clout to say, look, we've got to do things. But the trouble is, we went along with the German economic model. We actually promoted that economic. We drafted the Maastricht Treaty. I mean, it wasn't drafted by the Germans. It was drafted by the Brits.
One can accept every word you say and still say that you seem to be arguing about the past. I mean, what's happened has happened. Britain has voted to leave the European Union. Surely, economically, the concern now has to be, A, how Britain ends up in the best possible position, and B, picking up on your solidarity point, does it preferably without damaging our former partners?
Yes. I mean, I'm worried about the future, Adam. I'm worried about my children and especially my grandchildren. We are now inciting nationalisms across Europe, and we are doing it with the help of the Germans. The Germans are guilty here. But we've played a big part in this economic model that is proving so destructive. The liberalisation of finance, the liberalisation of trade, and the liberalisation of labour. That there should be no restrictions on the movement of any three of those sectors. And that's what's caused instability. You have to manage your flows of trade. You have to manage flows of labour, and you have to manage flows of capital.
Yes, but Brexit...
If you care about your own...
Brexit, does it not give us the power to limit flows of labour, which is precisely...
Yeah, but it doesn't give us... we are not going to limit flows of capital or trade. We're going to allow that.
Limit flows of words. I mean, I think that Brexit does precisely give you that freedom. Freedom to control the number of people coming into your country, freedom to set your own laws. But this notion that the EU has brought peace and prosperity to Europe is complete and utter bunkum. The EU embarked upon the Euro experiment, the greatest self-inflicted economic wound in the history of mankind. You can't blame that on the UK.
No.
We argued against it and we stood outside it, and we were right to do so.
I think, Roger, you're wrong about that. We are architects of that financial system. We are architects of the monetary system across Europe. We argued very powerfully for the free flow of capital across Europe long before we began arguing about immigration. This is a very Anglo-American model that is causing such disruption in Europe, and we have to take responsibility for that.
Well, hang on. The rules of the Eurozone are adopted by the Eurozone. Surely you can't blame America and Britain for that.
But they're based on an economic model which is that first and foremost, capital must be free to flow across borders without any hindrance, and trade too. And then, ultimately, labour should be free to do so as well, to reach the lowest common denominator.
Well, whatever people have said in the past, and no doubt they've said all sorts of things, my own view is that there's a difference between the freedom of movement of goods and services, and to some extent capital, on the one hand, and the freedom of movement of labour on the other. And it wasn't necessary, actually, to continue to have complete free movement of labour in order to preserve a free movement in goods.
I just want to ask you one question. You made it very clear that you think it's the right thing, Brexit. Do you, however, as economists, think there will be a significant transition cost for the economy?
I think some firms will have some sort of transition cost, yes. And inflation is moving up. We saw that today. So some consumers are going to lose out temporarily. But I'm actually persuaded that Britain overall is going to gain an enormous benefit. I'm not in favour of Brexit for political reasons, sacrificing that against some economic cost, balancing it out. I think Britain will gain massively in its economy.
I'm not a pessimist. I think we're a very wonderful entrepreneurial nation, and we are traders, and we have a very big current account deficit, which I think we should worry about. I think it would be a stimulus to our manufacturing to have a lower pound, and the value of the pound is determined by the City of London, not by other factors. So that yes, it would be fine.
Well, on that note of...
But there's a political cost.
I know. OK, thank you both very much indeed.